OpenAI is publicly known, but there's also another group of AI companies that we haven't announced yet, and they all have this common view of their need for flexibility while simultaneously needing rigor. The second thing is their view of the future of software is really interesting. Without speaking for any one of them, they would all categorically say that normal program software will continue to have a place. How it's built and how it is modified will change. Interface will become extremely dynamic, like in the sense that the interface was written specifically for you in the context, in the same way that your YouTube feed, that algorithm organizing information for you in a way that makes sense to you, that is going to be a very substantial change. And that is something that they all are thinking about and talking about.
Mark, welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged.
Hey, Jeff, thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to have this conversation. So I've been thinking of a few different things, but let's just start from the top and tell me about New, what you guys are doing.
So New is a new generation of quote-to-cash system, but you kind of got to think of it not quote-to-cash anymore. You have to think of it like anything to cash. So think quote, self-service, PLG, agentic, consumption, strangely,
right,
to cash. And I didn't create it. I'd actually sold a company to a unit of TA, and was going to go kiteboarding for the rest of my life or something. And then I met this incredible woman, Tina Kung, ex-Zora, ex-Salesforce CPQ, and she explained that in a multi-dimensional world, you have to build a new type of system to deal with it. And so I have the great honor of leading that company, and it's incredibly fun and it's incredibly exciting, and we have crazy ass customers.
Yeah. So for people that don't really know that space very well, kind of like lead me through like a common persona of someone or a company that would be using the software.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So we have companies as small as startups who manage to adopt New and go live in as little as 6 weeks. In fact, sometimes even faster than that. And even some quite large companies. So we just recently had a 400-person company that went live in about 8 weeks, right, on New.
Right.
But we also have multi-billion-dollar public and crazy growth stage companies using New, including OpenAI, which also famously went live with multi-billion dollars in 8 weeks. So the range of our customers is really wild. It goes from a few $1 million or $10 million of ARR. I think below $10 million, you don't really need a CPQ or any of these systems, to billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah. And what's the user, like who are the common users of the platform, and what's that look like?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question too, right? Because in some cases, you have to think of it like in modules. So there's a CPQ, and the CPQ, we're a billing company really, right? But we actually we understand that a billing system needs a really great CPQ, like it needs really good self-service. And so the users of our CPQ are mostly AEs, and another example is in the OpenAI case study, they talked about how much the AEs love using New because it's very automated. But it's the RevOps teams that are behind it also use some other parts of New that help them manage it really, really effectively. So literally none of our customers need a consultant to keep this thing going, which we're very proud of. So that's on the CPQ side. On the billing side, it's finance teams. And finance teams have complete control outside of Salesforce of all this stuff. And so they sort of think of it as a financial application, and the go-to-market team thinks of it as a go-to-market application, and the engineering thinks of it as a system to build really incredibly responsive self-service on, in which case the users for that part are either the engineers or the customers. And so it's a really interesting model. This actually causes us to have really weird pricing for our own product that takes into account that diversity of use cases, because you imagine like some people are just using CPQ, some people are just doing billing, and some people are doing all that stuff. Make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. With the rate of change that's going on with these companies and the market, like everything's speeding up really fast.
Hmm.
And like I think it's hard for companies to get their hands around pricing, what they can do, what they can't do, knowing what they testing things. Like how do you guys look at that, and what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so there's really we see two different groups of people with two different problems, right? Um, the one group of people are really being thought led by the major AI companies. They're thinking, well, who is the best window on what the next 3 years looks like or the next 5 years looks like? Probably those companies. And what those companies understand is that it's not just that things are going faster, but it's the speed at which it's going faster, what we sometimes refer to as the rate of change of the rate of change. Anybody who enjoyed calculus will get that. And but what that means is it's not just that you have to change faster, it's that you will have to change the way you change faster, right? And
Mm,
so those companies, what they're really opting, and even some of the small companies who are buying us, they're opting for future proof. They're opting for the fact that they would have to, they don't really know what's coming next, but whatever it is, you can handle it. And more to the point, if they have to change it, because it was so quick to set it up in the first place, it'll be quick to change it. So that's the one group. The other group of companies are not so worried about the changing the pace of change of their pricing. They're worried about the way in which the people buy is changing very quickly too. This is impacting how we assess products.
right.
Like using ChatGPT and things to assess, to do your product assessment, but it's also impacting. Okay, you got to support self-service, you got to support direct and channels, and now agentic. That's another group of companies. Same concern, but on a different dimension, really. I think.
Right. I talk to a lot of CEOs. I work with a lot of teams, and I think a lot of people are really thinking about that rate of change. And how long? What do I need to do to become the number one in our industry? But not only that, is like how do I remain in that spot? And I think that's becoming really challenging for teams. And I think at the forefront of that is and always is sales, right? And how do you test what you're doing? How do you figure out you're doing the right thing? How do you know which direction to go? And how do you get that information to really know what you're doing? What are your thoughts on that?
I think the old way of selling, where I'll call you up and say, "Hey, do you have this business problem?" And you go, "Yeah," and go, "Well, we solved this business problem for company X, and they were able to buy like everybody went home with a Ferrari." Like that way of
Right,
selling, I think that's already dead. Like I think that's already died, right?
right,
I think what you have to presume is that if either the customers heard about you or they haven't heard about you. If they haven't heard about you, marketing is going to be super important. But what they're going to do right after you talk to them, if they're in any way interested in what you had to say, is go on to mostly ChatGPT, sometimes Claude or Perplexity or um, Gemini, and they will start asking good questions about you. And
mm,
incredibly, if you go in, what you have to recognize is that all those models have different levels of awareness about different products. So your
right,
number one, before we used to keep all our documentation behind and all this sort of stuff. Now you basically got to make sure that every possible piece of information is out to be read by machines. And the salesperson, though, has to understand that that's what's going on. So what can you do that's valuable as a salesperson?
right,
You can go into somebody and say, "Hey, you're probably interested in this topic. Um, would you like me to share with you why people are adopting solutions like ours and when we're appropriate and when we're not?" Because the not part, that's the part that's hard to get at. And so if you want to be a trusted like what value add are you bringing as a salesperson? You're bringing more knowledge of what's going on in the environment than the person who you're talking to has. And if they don't perceive you that way, this is not going anywhere. If they go, "I can just go to ChatGPT and find out the truth," you have no value whatsoever. Where if you can say, "Can I add value to your day by actually helping you frame this problem?" Then I think
mm,
that's certainly what we're teaching our teams to do. And And I think the people who sell to me effectively are
Yep.
doing that as well.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Kind of going back into your history, I mean, you've led multiple SaaS companies, system integration companies. What's your prior experience telling you about this new organization that you're running?
Well, the first part was because of my prior experience, I had actually experienced the pain both as a systems integrator and as a customer. And so, what got me into new was, what got me into new was Tina Kung demonstrated canceling or replacing a multi-revenue model bundle with credits in it, even though most people weren't using credits at the time, but she looked at the Snowflake model that had been partially used through a year and canceling it and replacing it with something else in about 4 clicks and getting all of it right.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not saying that's a real use case that most people have, but it showed the, those things are really like each piece of that is a really big problem. So I immediately said, okay, that's what I was able to do is say that's real and it's meaningful and it's where a place everybody's hopefully going. Like your company
Mm-hmm.
is going to get into that complexity at some point. Um, but the other thing that I think I'm really drawing on is I was around for, really old guy. I was around for the SaaS revolution.
Right.
We went from on-prem to like for a minute and a half ASP application service providers who were
Yep.
basically hosted on-prem. And then we went to SaaS, and I was part of the first, really successful teams that rolled out NetSuite to increasingly scaled companies. And I think that was a massive change in how we did things, and it unleashed a staggering amount of creativity, right? Like
Yep.
now you didn't actually have to have a data center to do anything. You didn't have to have server farms, and most people have never even seen a server, right? And and I think that's what we're about to see the same thing. So a big thing I draw on is recognizing that these changes that when they happen, they're not just technical changes; they're going to be societal
Mm.
changes. And I think people get that about AI, but they're also going to change what exactly it is. So NetSuite and Salesforce are not SaaS versions of Siebel and QuickBooks or Siebel and Unpack or Siebel and whatever. They are actually complete reimaginations of what that thing would do. And that's what we're going to see now. We're going to see the same thing happening again, that people will go, well, what is a quoting system? Well, you know, what is a calendar? Right? Frankly, let's go really simple. Like, what is a calendar? Maybe a calendar is just something you talk to, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Totally rethinking what these things might be.
Right.
Yeah. 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 I also lived through I lived through the .com, the SaaS, you see those shifts and changes. And with that brings, like you said, it really unlocks opportunity and creativity. And sometimes you see stuff, history kind of show itself over and over again too, right? Like there's elements of, you and I have talked about this a little bit in the past, but SaaS and subscription model pricing, and then it going to usage, and now people thinking about, you know, subscription models again, and trying to figure out what that balance is on both sides, the organization that's selling and the organization that using it. Where do you think that's going to land, and what are you seeing in that space right now?
So yeah, it's really interesting because like we had the first emergence of SaaS pricing, Zora, right? And good, better, best, and eventually more sophisticated versions of that. And then what started to happen is people said, oh, wait a second, you build a company way faster if you're just pure, you pay as you go usage. And you can, right? As long as it's hard to replicate the software. But if it turns out that it's not hard to replicate the software because you can write code, you can buy your code and get something out really quickly, then there's a real
Right.
danger that those customers get drawn away by the shiniest whatever thing. And so companies are trying to move back to a subscription model to lock people in and get contracted, and also to be able to invest in those customers. It's not just predatory. It's like you want to invest in them more. Well, you just trained them that actually they were just consuming things. So we're seeing both problems. We're seeing subscription companies trying to introduce consumption models, and the consumption and the CFOs going, what? Like, I don't want less certainty about my pricing. I just want less cost. I don't want less certainty. And if this is all AI based, shouldn't this be cheaper than the thing I had before, not more expensive? And so certainly was seeing that with Salesforce getting basically a lot of blowback on their new pricing. And then on the other side, we're seeing people go, wait a second, why would I want a contract when I was doing pay as you go before? What's the benefit to me?
Mm-hmm.
In new, we've already been grappling with this because of the range of our customers. You can buy anything that new sells on a seat or transaction basis. So you can buy CPQ like seats, or you can buy CPQ based on dollars, or you can buy CPQ based on consumption of dollars, like using the system. And you can buy billing that way. And you can, it's not quite the same because you buy billing per invoice or per percentage of revenue, or you can buy our APIs all that way, or you can buy the whole freaking thing as a percentage of revenue commitment, or you buy the whole freaking thing as a percentage of revenue consumption. Like basically, this we do all those things. Now, part of it is a flex because we can do all those things. We can do
Right,
all those
right.
things, right? But the other part of it is just recognizing that if you're like imagine two $50 million companies, one sells 500, my math, $100,000 contracts, and the other one sells, um, 5,000 $10,000 contracts, the value of the parts of that system are completely different for those people. And I think that's what everybody needs to understand to really grow. It's not that usage is right or subscription is right or whatever is right. It's that you have different segments, and offering different ways of buying your product will allow you to maximize the value of those different segments. I think would be our biggest learning from watching the amazing companies we get to work with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's things are just moving so fast. I think it's hard for teams. They used to just have what is our pricing model, and that's the model. And then we use that for 6 months, 12 months, a year. We come back and revisit that when sales is complaining that this isn't working, or we need to make some adjustments. You take over more of the market. You add more product. But I think it's just becoming more and more complex. I mean, to go back to our conversation about the rate of change, I think it's just becoming more and more complex. A single individual or a team can't keep their finger on that. So you famously have a big footprint in AI, like working with those companies. Like, what have you learned from that?
Some really interesting things. Like the one is how similar they are in their view of what is about to happen. That's really
Right.
interesting. And OpenAI is publicly known, and Glean, publicly known, but and Jasper and a bunch of other people. But there's also another group of AI companies that we haven't announced yet, and they all have this common view of their need for flexibility while simultaneously needing rigor. Like it's not like that, these large companies don't still have the problem of, oh, you're in Germany and you're a nonprofit. The pricing model is different than the pricing model is for, I don't know, Boeing, right? They still have that problem and the flexibility and uncertainty problem, right? So,
Right.
um, so the second thing is their view of the future of software is really interesting. Without speaking for any one of them, I think they would all categorically say that software, that declarative or that normal program software will continue to have a place. How it's built and how it is modified will change. So I'll give you a good example. One of the conversations we've had with a number of them is that one of the ways AI will change software is that your interface will become extremely dynamic, right? Like in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that the interface was written specifically for you in the context, in the same way that your YouTube feed or your Spotify feed is unique to you, or your TikTok famously, right? And
Right.
so that algorithm organizing information for you in a way that makes sense to you, that is going to be a very substantial change, and that is something that they all are thinking about and talking about. However, that doesn't mean that there won't still be a purpose of having a vertically integrated thing. I don't know, for farmers figuring out where they put how much fertilizer to put on their fields based on data. Like, it's still a human being on the other end. And maybe at some point they go, well, no, the robots can do that, right?
Right.
We're a long way away from the robots doing that as a world.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's super interesting to me. What some people think of as agentic and what those guys think of as agentic is two completely different things, right?
How's that perspective changed how you are actually running new?
Well, New was always built to be interoperable with humans and machines, like from the get go. So I'll give a good example. So the case that I first talked about before, where you could swap things out really, really quickly, the
Right.
reason a human being could do that was because that was very, very tightly typified. That also makes it easy for machines to do that, right?
Right.
The other thing is that our pricing engine is designed to have code inserted into it to make it do things that it was never designed to do without breaking it, right? So people use that today, right now, to customize New. They don't normally have to very much, but if you had something really weird that you wanted to do and you go, yeah, sure, just as long as you thought about how to maintain it, the how you would maintain it part is going to get really easy, really fast in the next 8 months. So in other words, instead of people doing that, New's going to do that for you. And so if you want to go, oh, actually, I want to have pricing that is based on my shoe size and how many cats do I own, but only for this customer, and you can't buy a penguin if you already own a dog, like
Right.
whatever, right? Right now, if you think in conventional systems, that is really, really complicated to set up. But if you can what's going to happen really quickly in software, and for us and for lots of other people, that is going to become really, really simple. Because if you can describe it,
It can
you can
do it.
do it. Now, the reason New
Yeah.
can do it is that will be converted into code, and the code will execute along with the other code, and there's no conflict. A lot of other systems would have a great deal of difficulty with that. So I think that's really exciting because and it has a huge implication for consulting, though. Like, holy crap! Like, if you think that your job is to do really complicated things inside systems, you should go find another job. Your job is to give people really good advice about how they can leverage systems. You will continue to have a job function because literally nobody wants that advice from ChatGPT, right?
Right. Right.
Even
Right.
if it turns out to be right, nobody wants to be going when the project goes sideways and giving that answer. They want to say, we worked with our consultants and they recommended this and we did this, and I guess it didn't work out, but I took good advice from professional people. If your job though is putting tab A in slot B, that will be gone. Well, for New, that's already gone. Like, that's already substantially gone. Like, if we can deliver, we have customers in effect self-implementing, like almost self-implementing, right?
Yep.
And that's and our AI investments will make that more and more and more easy. So we're actually rolling out an entirely new business model for the consulting sector that's actually a throwback to the NetSuite world, but for the same reason. But we're going to be rolling out a completely new revenue model that's really, consultants have to think of themselves as more the guides that help people adopt technology and not the adopters or the drivers of that adoption.
Yeah, that's what I kind of wanted to get into a little bit. Like, how do you see the organization that you're running right now based on all this that you're seeing out there? Like, how do you, with the rate of change happening externally, I feel like, and the clients I work with, really trying to get them aligned and having a mechanism and cadence to ingest information and make changes is sped up, right? Like,
Yeah.
I would say, even going way back to like the early 2000s when I worked with teams, like we do like a 1 year plan and then maybe meet, once, twice a year. Now my teams, almost all of them, even the larger ones it's because we're moving so fast, is that we have more of a 90-day cadence and they have a weekly cadence. We're really like reviewing what's working, what's not working, right? Like, where we want to put our bets and make our bets. Where do we want to put our focus? The product is changing quickly, but the market's changing quickly, right? And like, we have to restructure and reorganize more often because of these changes. Like, how are you adapting to that?
So one thing I noticed recently is the there are two trends that I'm seeing, both inside in New, but also in our customers. I can't really tell you which customers right now because now we're getting into really about how people run their companies, right?
Right.
But the fastest moving companies are running the entire company like an engineering project. So they have epics and they have sprints, and those are 3 week sprints. It's
Right.
3 week sprint, analyze for a week, new 3 week sprint, analyze for a week, new 3 week sprint, over and over and over again, right?
Right.
And the reason for that is, and this goes back to if you, I can't remember if anybody wrote a book about this, but it definitely was a phrase that I've used. Most people think it's ready, aim, fire, but it's actually in tech, it's fire, aim, ready, fire. Like, because you just do something, right? Recalibrate, right? Then plan, like get some data, then
Yes.
plan, then do something else and do it. And I think we're getting back into that, break something
Right. Right.
modality.
Right.
But the difference is the tools are better. So, for example, people go, well, what was wrong with that? Well, what was wrong with that was that the analysis that happened was garbage. Like, how many people can actually do analysis? Oh, I was run, 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 run. And then, analysis. Well, now with AI, you can do the analysis. Like, in fact, the analysis could be happening the entire time, right? So
Yeah.
you'd be sitting there going, okay, let's just take all this data and now let's see if this is actually working.
Right.
And what are the trends? What are your recommendations? And you can draw, and what AI is also drawing is the experience of other teams, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's a really interesting thing. The other thing is you have to stop thinking of doing things and thinking of enabling them to happen. Like, so that sounds like the same thing, but it's not.
Yeah.
Like, so a
Explain that.
good
Explain that.
so a good example of the difference is between doing consulting and training other people to do consulting. One of the big things is people are building software and hiring other engineers to build software that you designed. Like, these are enablement functions, right? Well, now we have to think about enablement where the if you could get an AI, for example, to lay out the plan for somebody or to do any step you can get them to do, that doesn't just make it go faster, it enables more people to do it.
Hmm.
So, uh, yeah, that's a good example. Enablement versus doing things. And I think when I actually set our goals for this year, it's like, yeah, we have a revenue goal, and yeah, that's definitely going to work out. But I said to everybody, I don't really care what the revenue number is. I care about this thing, and this thing, and these are all enablement activities. And if we do
Right.
all those things well, the revenue number, not only just the revenue number this year, but the revenue number next year and the year after will happen.
Right.
If we don't do those things, even if we hit the revenue number, the wheels are going to come off the cart. I think a lot of people who run tech companies go, Mark, that's not a new thing. That's always been a thing, right? I'm just saying the new tools make it more likely to succeed. Like, we've always tried to do it, but I think that using tools in a new way can make it succeed.
Right. I totally believe that too. And enablement to me is like building capabilities in the organization. Like, I think we
And
like,
outside too.
yeah, and we like set these plans, but then the question I think a lot of teams don't really ask is like, not only what do we need to do, but like, how are we going to do it and who's going to do it? When's it going to get done by? And those are the building blocks of building capabilities internally within the organization and externally. And those are the things that we need to focus on because those are the things that actually build an organization. And I think a lot of times teams will just say, hey, we need to do these things. All right, let's go. But they don't have that second deeper layer of conversations of what do we actually need to do to achieve these things. And especially in teams that are doing things that are never done before, they're highly cross-functional, right? So we really need to
Right.
know what our role is, what our team role is, who's going to do what. And then like, I think like what you're saying too, and I'm seeing this with a lot of teams I'm working with, we can actually analyze the stuff that we're doing more clearly now. We can make plans more clearly now and enable other people to do those things, but we can actually track them to see if they worked or didn't work. And having that mechanism of doing tracking, you can keep on dialing that in a lot faster. And I think that's what's speeding things up. And I think a lot of people
Yeah.
kind of miss that. And that happens from day one as a founder of an organization. You have some assumptions, you do some stuff, you figure out what works, what doesn't. As you grow an organization and really scale an organization, you need to keep and have some sort of framework because that's happening in every single function of the organization, from sales to product to engineering. Everybody's just dialing in what they're doing, what's working, I think. And we haven't had the tools in order to analyze that. And now that we have those tools, we can adjust faster.
Yeah, I think the military is famously good at this, right?
Right.
So 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 the president decides, hopefully not, but the president decides whether to invade a country, right? And but not how, right? And the generals decide how to invade the country. Or let me make it a little less offensive. Defend the country, right?
Right. Okay.
And this moves down the ranks. The job gets more and more and more granular, right?
Right.
And what they famously don't do, is inject decisions down. Like they just go, take that hill. I'm not going to tell you how to take that hill. You guys figure out how to take the hill, right?
Right.
And so this distributed execution is something that the flaw in companies. The military has got a relatively discrete problem, right? It's like these are and relatively known ranges of things. And this still goes, the whole thing is the plan's always, or as Tolstoy famously said in War and Peace, right? I'm not sure he actually said it in these words, but no battle plan survives engagement with the enemy. What he actually said was that the generals take credit for the chaos and the accidental things that happen, right? And they
Right.
say, oh, that's totally intended. But I guess it's the art of war, right? Actually, the quote comes from. But now with systems, instead of thinking about systems bringing information up, what if we take the same attitude and say we want to use systems to make information and awareness go down and empower people to act more freely? I think people are going to get things done, but I don't think we have really good management structures for doing that. Like I think, have you ever read the book Multipliers?
Yeah.
That's a really good book about
Right.
that, right?
Yeah.
About not telling people what to do, asking them what they think they should do, guiding them, reinforcing them, but occasionally
Right.
demanding exactly what you want because you still have to get stuff done. But
What I wrote about in my book and my philosophy of what really works best, and this changes at different stages of organization, but it's not only down and up, but it's across.
mm-hmm.
Right. I think that's like, and if you wanted to use some military ideas, defending, like, we have Homeland Security. Well, that used to be a lot of different divisions. Now it's one division, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
or you have these different military, like trying to work together. And sometimes, they'll say, no, we're not going to do that. And we need help. We're on the hill, right? So it's like, how do we that cross-functional nature of teams needs to be real. It's really important, especially when teams have no blueprint, meaning like there's no blueprint for the business that you're doing right now because you guys are in new territory and in a new
Mm-hmm.
market, and things are changing. But how do we cross-functionally understand what we're all doing and making sure that we're in alignment with that? And I think what it does, it takes a lot of iterations. Right? I think it takes a lot of iteration.
And there's some non-obvious things that come out of this where you go, oh, wow, in retrospect, that's so obvious. So old world, the teams that own documents are the only people who are allowed to touch them, right? It's
Right.
the old world. Makes perfect sense, right? Then you got the Glean world, where unless something is permissioned for it to be excluded from you, you can find it. And so what happens is, and this happened in our company today, leading to our COO to send out a memo reminding everybody, don't put documents in view-only mode. If it's that sensitive, don't share with anybody. But if you share with them, let's presume that everything you've shared with people that's open and available in the system is going to be repurposed in different ways by different people. And so somebody on our sales team is going, I would like to share this slide from one of our implementation decks with a customer because I think it's a really good way of explaining what they're going to do when they go through our training. And it was in view only mode. He couldn't copy it. He was like losing his mind, right? Going, this is absolutely the perfect asset I need, and I can't get it. So it's not like we're doing this perfectly, but it's this different attitude to how you organize teams, and also how you encourage the teams to think about what their peers, like what the value of what they do is. So if you make something, Glean enables other people to find it. And guess what? They should probably be able to leverage it and use it without asking you or bothering you. And if you don't think it should do that, just one of the things we love about Glean is just don't share it, and then they won't find it, even though they're the same search queries. So that's cool. Let me ask you. Let me turn it on you.
Okay.
So what is the biggest change? Obviously, the pace of change. So, what's the
Yeah.
biggest change that you are seeing in the work that you do with the way teams are organizing themselves? I've been talking about this as an idea, but you
Right.
actually work with teams all the time, right? That's how
Hmm.
you and I got to meet. How are you? What are you seeing that people are successfully adopting that makes their teams work more with the pace of change and the pace of change?
Yeah. Well, this is funny, and this might be the first time that I've actually said it this way. The teams that are actually willing to pause, like literally pause, come together. We do like when we launch a team, we do 2 days leadership team together and just pause for a second, right? Like this seems so like opposite of what the world's doing right now, which is like going faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, right? But the teams that are willing to pause and take a second just to think. And then we do some prep work ahead of time coming into the session. So they're kind of unpacking their thoughts and working with their teams bottom up across, right? But then they come into the session and we just try to really pause and give space for the right conversations and go through the right path of having these conversations, and then to really just align. And this sounds so simplistic, but like a team in a launch session or annual session are going from, let's remind ourselves of why we're doing this in the first place, our
Mm-hmm.
mission. You don't have to spend a lot of time on that, but like that's a focal point that's important. And then bringing it back, we build a 3-year vision, a simple 3-year vision, just so we kind of can see where we're tracking and that we're kind of align ourselves. That 1-year plan is important. We do that in a certain way. And then the next 90 days, some teams 180 days. But the fact if you can just get a team to sit and pause for a second, reflect on what's working, what's not working, call it a QBR or annual review. What's most important for us? Let's narrow that down so we can really focus. And it's bringing those inputs back in. I think a lot of times what you'll see now with a lot of teams is that they have so much information at hand and they have so many ideas because of all this information. They're kind of almost running. I used to say teams are running in 5 different directions. Now, some of these teams, first time that I meet with them, are literally running in 30 different directions and they don't realize it because it's just the information overload. But the ones that
Mm-hmm.
can sit there and pause, rethink this through, put it together, simplify it, and then really get clear, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Who's going to do it? When's it going to get done by? And then have a weekly cadence on that. Or where are we at with this?
Mm-hmm.
What's this look like when it's done, by the way, too? I think a lot of teams struggle with that, where they make a plan, everybody understands the plan, and then they finish the plan and they're like, is that really what we wanted to get done? Did
Right.
that really move the needle? And
We actually
so,
did all the steps, but the outcome wasn't necessarily what nobody ever said. This is, you know, like one of the things. This is we have a really good example of this,
yeah,
both a positive one and a bad and a negative one.
right.
So the positive one, or the negative one that people get into is feature creep in products,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where they just go, let's do this, let's add that, let's add that, let's add that, and one thing that we have done well and not well at New is sometimes lose track of that. And every once in a while we go stop and go, okay, wait a second. Are we focusing on the most important things? Because it's easy to do a lot of stuff and then discover that you've wasted some time by doing things that maybe only apply to one person or something like that, right?
Right.
And I think all software companies do that. And the idea is you're going to do that. Let's try to do it like 80% the scalable case and 20% the not scalable. But
Yep.
so that's the one example. The other one though is when we set our goals for this year, we had this enablement objective, like I said, and I said to everybody, look, we're going to do this thing first, which is launch a quick start program to enable our smallest customers to go live with no implementation at all, right? And we said the objective is to get that live. And the people who worked on that project were laser focused on that objective. But that
Right.
wasn't the real objective. The real objective was building content that was so good that it could be used by our next tier of customers to make them much better participants in the implementation process.
Hmm.
And it turns out when we went to test that, because we actually made it really clear what the first goal was, the
Mm-hmm.
content was really well optimized for that outcome. And it turns out when we put those second cohort through the system, one of those companies accidentally self-implemented. Like they actually, while going through the training
Yeah.
in their off time, they actually implement the entire system. And we were like, what? And not a small company, like 400 person company, right? So it's not a big company, but it's not like a tiny company.
Yeah.
And so the point of it was but if we'd said to the first team, your objective is to build training for the second use case, how?
Right.
Like, how? That's too big of a problem. Where we just said, let's keep it discreet. And I'm not saying that it's looking backwards. We sound like geniuses, but it was just like, let's just bite off a small objective and
Yep.
kill that one and then move on to the next one. It turns out killing the first one killed the second one.
Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
interesting. Yeah. I find a lot of teams, they're just scattered. And, see if I have a good analogy for this. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu probably for the last, I think, about 14, 15 years. So I grapple with people, and a lot of times I'm training with newer people. And when you train with someone that's new, they're scattered and they're trying all these different things and they're freaking out because they're new at it, right? And a lot of times I get into organizations and some of the employees are acting like that. Like they're just trying to do everything possible and they just don't have focus. And I think at the end of the day, we're on a timeline and we only have so much capital and we only have so much energy. And I think it's really important just to pause, even though the world's running a million miles an hour, and just really think about like, if I only could do 3 things in 1 year or 3 years or whatever the
Mm-hmm.
timeline is, what are those things? So we can take all that capital and everybody's energy, which isn't unlimited, and really focus it into those areas. And the companies that do that, from my perspective, that I've seen, over the last 20 years, they're the ones that always get ahead. It's the ones
And
that are just just spreading themselves too thin. They're not progressing far enough into those paths.
yeah, totally. And I don't know a lot about jujitsu. I know a little bit. I know less about Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but I think I understand that one of the principles of jiu-jitsu is that using your opponent's energy against them, right?
Yes.
And so I think one of the things I see that I have done and I see other people doing, and sometimes I catch ourselves doing, and we try to correct for that, is trying to go in trying to change the world rather than try to go in the direction the world is going in a better way. And
Right.
people going, in a perfect case, it'd be like this. It's like, yeah, but it doesn't have to be a perfect case. Like for example, um, you know, there is a trend towards adopting certain forms of agentic assistance in all sorts of different things. Battling that trend, there's some good merits for why you might not want to do that, right? That is probably going to be a hard case to make. It may turn out that you're right, but it's going to be quite difficult, as opposed to saying, how would we be able to take what other people are doing in companies and adapt that learning to what we do is more like taking what the way the market's going and just to go back to the jiu-jitsu analogy, throwing the market into the wall, like
Right.
or whatever the thing is, like rather than the other one, which is like stop, pay attention to the way I see the world. It's like, no, why
Right.
don't you pay attention to the way the world sees you, and then try to
Right.
go with that. And
Yeah, you're
so
totally right. You use their energy to get to where you want to go. And
right,
so
exactly, right.
the world is moving in a certain direction. It's probably better to set your sail to catch that wind and go in that direction and try to fight a different direction.
Yeah, I was speaking at a pavilion event, and they
Yeah.
said, "What's the number one thing you've learned in your whole career? In multiple companies." And I said, "Never enter an empty market. Always go into a market that already exists and make it better. It's so hard to be a category. I mean, there are people who've done it, like Slack, right? But
Yep.
it wasn't like there was no messaging market, right? Like they
Right.
just made a much better messaging app. If people go,
Right.
oh, it's a category definer. No, not really. Like the same functionality exists all over the place and all sorts of things.
Right.
There's chat in Google Apps. Like they just went and did it to the next degree. And I think if you think of all sorts of products that you think of as category defining, they're not really. they didn't come out of the woods from whole cloth, with the exception of generative AI, which really did, right? But a bunch of other things are really somebody going, hey, there's a market over here. Like the inspiration for Slack, as I recall, was basically email is a terrible way to do certain types of interactions. It just
Mm.
doesn't, like, and they wanted to create a system that was less like that. And I think they did. And we
Yeah.
all use it, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah,
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
The fact that we went from telephones to email to Slack, it's interesting how they saw that, and I think they adjusted their sales and built what was really needed. And I think sometimes companies can see that a big picture thing, and I think sometimes companies will really dial into something very small.
I'm always interested in the people who got rid of some of the other modalities. I look at my life. I have a phone, right, and I have email, and I have Slack, and I have WhatsApp, and I have all the other sort of subject matter communication tools that are really content communication dressed up as content, or content dressed up as communication, and now we have OpenAI. So I don't seem to be shedding ways of interacting very well, but I think my understanding is that some companies really are. And I think that's a different level of focus as a company, where you go, you know what, we're going to use these tools in very intentional ways. And I'm very interested in that. I don't really have any wisdom on it. I'm just really
Yeah.
interested in people who do that.
Yeah, that is interesting. I haven't gone down that path. That's interesting. I do have one question I want to ask you. It's kind of an open-ended question, and I like asking this question. You've been in, kind of this tech world for a long time, from raising capital and building products and, building companies. What do you think's not talked about enough that's important?
The number one thing I think that people don't talk about is the lack of seriousness that people often approach their projects and entire companies with. And let me explain what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Everybody kind of knows that what you're supposed to do, and actually what Tina did at New, is come up with a thesis and then go out and talk to a whole bunch of people who you believe have the problem, and then refine that thesis and then present that thesis back to them as in the form of a solution. And then when you get approval, when you get their buy-in, build it, right?
Hmm.
I have never done that. Like, until I came to New, it's always been, and then we talk about it famously, pivoting,
Right.
right? Pivoting. Pivoting is what is the polite explanation for you wasted millions of dollars of somebody else's money doing the wrong thing. And because what we do is so hard,
Right.
and if you don't love it, don't do it. But what we do is so hard that people have to create a psychological, explanation for what you're doing and make it positive in some way, that you're pivoting, right? But what you actually did was you just burned millions of dollars of somebody else's money. So I think that when we see what makes companies go really well, and this goes back to your pausing thing, is people aren't in. They are, of course, intentional. Like, what they're not intentional the way Tina's intentional. Like, they're not the way. And so I lead this company, but I'm under no illusion that that I am the only driver of value, or some, come down from on high and run this company. I've got an amazing company because we have amazingly intentional people. And there's a bunch of people in our company who literally, when offered a problem, will go to the data and do it. And there are a bunch of people in our company who don't do that, right? And what we have to sort of talk about is that those are different ways of solving problems. And it's not that one way is uniquely good and the other one is uniquely bad. It's actually, they're good in different situations. But I think in our community generally, we don't really pay enough. We pay lip service, but not enough respect to the think it through very carefully before you start
Right.
part.
Right. Right.
If you understand what I mean, because basically people go, like, go back to the fire, fire, aim, ready,
Yeah.
like that thing. That's a different modality. So you definitely don't want salespeople. Well, you definitely don't want SMB salespeople or early salespeople who have to plan everything before they do anything because they'll never get
Right.
anything done. You
Right.
sure as hell want enterprise salespeople who plan the living daylights out of it. If you're going after multi-million-dollar contracts, you better know like where their children. No, children go to school would be creepy, but you know what I mean. Like you need to know everything about them because you don't know which is going to be relevant, and you're building a value framework. And so
Yeah.
this is a good example. I don't think we give enough respect to the companies that or to the process steps companies should be doing to stop and go, okay, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Is there any evidence for that?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that, does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And I think you took that line pretty much out of my book. I
Oh,
really
really?
think, well, I think a lot of teams really, the best teams pause and think about what they're doing and just do the work. And then and I think part of planning, I think planning is execution, right? Like your job is
Tell me about
as,
that.
I think as, let's say you're the CEO of the organization, like everything that is done in the organization to grow the organization is executing, right? Your job is to make sure that you give time on your plate and your team's plate to do
Yeah.
that work that you're talking about, to come together, to have the right conversations, to distill down what you need to do. And then you make that plan, and then you work that plan, and you check in on that plan. Every piece of that is execution, right? That's
This,
your role,
yeah, that makes perfect
is to make
sense.
sure to execute. And I think a lot of people think, oh, planning, that's good to do, but we're too busy. Like, no, that is execution. That is part of the whole system of everything that we do. And that's why I like to think of like an operating system, the tools and the cadence create the right behaviors and outcomes. And again, all of that is execution. Everything. And I always love the phrase, everything's execution. When I hear that, what I hear is like, no, everything's execution.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's how I think of it, and that's what I see.
I think the other thing we have to respect that people have different strengths, and it's not just that it's an organizational behavior, but it's an individual behavior, and you have to recognize what people are really awesome at.
Yeah.
And so, for example, we have guy James MacArthur's on our team who is he's notionally our head of RevOps, and he's a great head of RevOps, but he's really one of our leading advocates into that community, and he is absolutely freaking fearless and amiable and knowledgeable and just kind of the person everybody wants to hang out with, but also a wealth of knowledge that people can ask questions of, right? He couldn't be more different than one of our chief engineers, right? Our
Mm.
One of our chief engineers, Wembo, an amazing, like deeply intelligent and thoughtful and precise and similarly brave and courageous and detailed person, right? They are colleagues. They like and respect each other. They would approach problems in completely different ways. And because they're in the right jobs, it's fantastic, right?
Right.
If they had the opposite jobs, total mess, right? They would like Wembo would not be good in front of thousands of people. Maybe he would. I've never seen Wembo do that, but like they're just different people, and they're both amazing colleagues who I love and respect and value very much. But they are very different people, and I'm just picking those two out because they're both awesome.
Yep.
So many awesome people we get to work with, but that's a good example of these amazing people who their individual differences matter. And so when we think of teams, you have to also understand the teams, depending on who's on the team, they will just behave differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Every team I work with is a different flavor, right? And you add a new team member, you take off a team member, it changes what that is. But I really believe is, you can, building the right team is an iteration, and it's going to change over the time, and trying to have the best team at all times is what you're trying to do. But it's all those different things that those people bring, is you try to bring those to bear, and having them in the right role and having clarity in the right roles, and focusing on the right things is a process. It's a
yeah, yeah.
process. But as long as you can always keep on moving things forward, that's the goal, especially in companies like these. So I have one last question for you. I could talk to you probably all afternoon, and I know we don't have time, but I could. But the one last question, it's more of a scenario. I always like to end it on this question. So the scenario is, you're trapped on a desert island the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
You got everything you need. You got food, you got water, maybe healthcare, everything you need. But Mark, the only thing you don't have is entertainment. There's no entertainment on the island. But luckily for you, an old 80s boombox drifts ashore with unlimited batteries. But you can
All
only
right.
bring one album to listen to the rest of your life. What are you going to bring?
The best of the style council. I'd bring actually, or yeah, that basically, yeah, I'd bring the style council.
What
I'd
is? I've
basically
never heard of that before. What is that?
so style council. It's like a neo. It was a neo jazz band from the UK. One of their songs, the "You're the Best Thing," is inscribed on the inside of my wedding ring,
No way.
and they're just and it's Paul Weller, the guy was the Jam. He was the lead guy behind the Jam. Town Called Malice and things like that. A great bop 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 bop, and then he went in. This is his more lyrical period, and but the funny thing of it is it's class warfare as cool jazz. So he's like is like you got to basically like songs like you know life at a top people's health club and stuff like this. It's all about the about in northern England where I'm from and about the deprivation and the hopelessness, but just with a catchy beat. And so it's thoughtful and it's interesting political ideas and maybe far left of where I am, but still interesting political ideas and truly beautiful music. So if I could only listen to one album, I'd listen to the best of the Style Council.
Wow.
Probably. What would you? What would you take?
That's a great answer, and I'm going to be listening to that this weekend now because I don't never listened to that before. It sounds
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's like yeah, but yeah,
my
it's so hard
answer
to pick
always
another.
changes. My answer always changes based on what people are saying because I listened to that, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Today, what would I? You know what? As I look over at one of my guitars on the wall,
Mm.
I think I would bring I think I'd bring the Police, something from the Police, or something from Sting. I think that's kind of the vibe I'm
The,
feeling right now.
yeah, the first Police album was like actually all the Police albums were great. Um, yeah, I mean, I Can't Stand Losing You is like yeah, it's just like
It's iconic.
I mean, yeah, iconic. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I could see that. I could see that. I always kind of liked Sting's first solo album, Dream of the Blue Turtles, which was just like just kind of like everything you liked about the Police slowed down. so,
yeah,
yeah.
that's a good way to put it.
So I'm putting myself in the theme that I kind of like, Sade, like all the, actually Sade when we did that album, like that first Sade album was pretty crazy,
Yeah,
crazy good. But
it's a hard question, and it's funny because I can ask people a lot about business, and we can talk all day long, and I ask that question, and it stops them in their tracks. It's a hard one. And for someone like me that really loves music, it's really hard.
did you ever watch Professor of Rock on YouTube?
No.
This guy called Professor of Rock. Oh my God, he's great. I don't know what his real name is, but he actually managed to get interviews with all sorts of people, and he goes like he always does top 10 lists from this
Yeah.
year and that year, but
Okay.
with like tons of history around it. Like for example, I never realized that "Who Are You?" The famous Who
Yep.
anthem
Yep.
that. There's like three F bombs in that and once you've heard it you're like
You can't unhear it.
how did radio allow that to be on the I don't have any problem with it but how did they not take that out and but it quite clearly drops like three F bombs. So
That's
I'd
so
say
funny.
I learned that from Professor Rock a few weeks
We'll
ago. Yeah.
have to check him out.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks
Thanks
so much
for
for
being
doing
on the
this.
show. Yeah, it's great having you on the show, and I appreciate you being on it.
It was fun. Thank you.